Hello everyone. Ryan from Avatar Aquatics. Thank you guys so much for coming out today. Two things that I really wanted to talk about today. Number one is to just give you guys an update about what's been happening in the fish room lately because lots of stuff really exciting, lots of babies. And then the second thing that I wanted to do is to spend the majority of the time talking about breeding the Cardinal Tetra. I know I recently dropped part one of the breeding Cardinal Tetra series and working on number two, part two. And so throughout this whole time, if you guys have any questions about the Cardinal Tetra or the other fish that we'll be talking about today, feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll get around to answering all those questions. So let's get started. So recently, I've been breeding a lot of German blue rams, and throughout that whole process, I've definitely learned a lot about what it's like to keep cichlids. Originally, I had just had angelfish, but with the German blue rams, what I really found out is that these guys are really, really cute and they're really fun to grow up. But if you don't feed them enough, their numbers start decreasing really, really fast. And the second thing is to try to hatch them out in a hatching container before you put them into their grow out container. Because if you have the big, say, 10-gallon grow out container and put the eggs in there, the babies hatch out and then they get dispersed through the bottom of the tank. And then for some reason, they just don't survive. It's very hard for them to actually survive on the bottom of the grow out tank. So what I do is I have the eggs, I put them into a small container with some methylene blue. I drop the methylene blue in, make the water all blue and nice, and then run an airline so that there's some water circulation, not too much, but just enough to keep that water turning. And then once they hatch out, I start slowly changing out the water with the rare out container water or the rare out tank water. So at that point, once they're free swimming, I still keep them in that container. And then when they actually, they've gotten a couple meals in, they're getting a little bigger, and then I put them into the grow out container. And I think that's or the grow out tank. And I think that is actually the best way to save your babies. If you're finding that your German blue rams are dying all of a sudden after they hatch out, most of the time it's because number one, if you have a rare out container that's 10 gallons, that's very, very big compared to the actual babies themselves. And you're going to have to feed a lot of infusoria. And if you don't want to foul your water with the infusoria, it's much better to just drip a little bit of infusoria in a small grow out container. And then when they're getting bigger, when they can swim around and look for, say, baby brine shrimp, then go ahead and put the babies into the bigger tank. Second thing is I started my outdoor tub, and it's really exciting because I put like 7 mountain minnows, white cloud, normal mountain minnows in there. And 2 days ago, I started, finding fry in my tanks, and it's really exciting. I don't think I've ever released a video on that, but overall the water's like super green. There's tons of algae. I put the daphnia. I had a daphnia video where we go out into the wild and catch the daphnia. Put the daphnia in there too. So hopefully they're reproducing. The adults are eating them. They're getting nice and well conditioned. They're giving me more eggs. Um, the thing is though, I put them into the tank, but I also dump a lot of the Cardinal Tetra breeding container water whenever I do water changes into that tub. So I'm not really sure if the fry are mountain minnows or Cardinal Tetras. But speaking of Cardinal Tetras, that was pretty much all of the updates. And so we can spend the rest of the time talking about the Cardinal Tetra. So to begin, um, let's start with where I sourced the tetras themselves, because I think that is very important. I don't talk about this in my first video, but these cardinal tetras that I got were actually not my first cardinal tetras. I went to a local fish store, and I'm not going to talk exactly, tell you guys which store it is, because I don't want people to like, boycott them. But went to a local fish store around me, saw the Cardinal Tetras. I absolutely fell in love. I had been looking for Cardinal Tetras everywhere and been trying to look for them online. But a lot of times, like you go online, Cardinal Tetras are like what, $3 or $4 cheaper than at your local fish store. But then you go to the checkout screen, and that shipping fee is like $50 for a school of like 10 tetras, and it makes me really sort of averse. I don't really want to spend $50 on shipping. So I go to the local fish store. Finally, they finally had some Cardinal Tetras in, because recently it's been very hard on the supply chain, but finally had that Cardinal Tetras in. I bought 15 and took them home, and within like 3 or 4 days, they were pretty much all dead. I lost 10 fish out of the 15, and I have a water test. I took that water test many, many times at home. And then I took another sample back to the fish store, gave it to them. They checked it out. They said, it should be okay. I acclimated. It's not the first time I've bought fish, right? But it was like a really depressing thing to to go to the fish store, pick out 15 fish, bring them home within 3 to 4 days. 10 of them die. It's really sad. Um, but I decided to go ahead and just like not get any more fish from the local fish store, and I ordered the cardinals online from a retailer that Corey from Aquarium Co-op actually. I think they're kind of like in cahoots with each other. It's called aquahuna.com, and I got it from them, and that's also where I got my German blue rams from. So they came in 10 cardinals. They sell them in schools of 10. They don't break them down into smaller sizes, but they came in all juveniles, very pale looking. You could see that they were cardinals. You could see that they were cardinals. They have the red-ish color, but it's not like the super bright red that you see on my shirt here. It's more like a see-through three see-through red, and those are like the juvenile colors. So don't think that they're selling you knockoff cardinals that don't have the nice coloration. But the cardinal tetras, when they're younger, they don't have that full color. Unlike where you go to school to the store and you see neon tetras, they already pretty much all have the blue and the red and the white bellies. Um, but I just fed them really well. Bunch of brine shrimp, live baby brine, pellets, whatever, for about 2 months. And it took them about 2 months from when I got them um, to start showing their real Cardinal Tetra colors. And throughout that time, I was just feeding them really well. But when when they get from like juvenile colors to adult colors, it actually takes them a little bit longer to start breeding. So overall, it took me about 8 months to go from receiving them in the mail to start breeding them. Even though I've been feeding really well throughout this time, I'm taking care of the water parameters, taking care of their needs, doing water changes, keeping the water clean. And hello, Save the Fins. Hello, Cooper. Hello, Brandon. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Um, and so let's see, what was I going to keep talking about? Okay, so I just want to say, like, if you lose fish in the beginning, it, and you made sure that you acclimated right, you fed them well, you do all of that stuff right, the water's right. It might not be you. It could be that the cardinal tetras are just finicky in general. And same thing with the rummy nose that I got from that local fish store. Boom, like all of them, like dead after a couple of days. Whereas if I get it from a Petco near me, a pet, there, people in this hobby, hate those big box stores, but the one near me, I'm really thankful to have people who are like knowledgeable about the hobby and people who keep on top of their stuff. And they carry cardinals, they carry rummy nose, they carry like uh, what are those fan shrimps? Bamboo shrimps, and all those things are like things that you don't normally see at a Petco, but my Petco near me has them. And so if I get my rummy nose from there, rummy nose are fine. Like I think I've of like the 40 or so rummy nose tetras that I've gotten from that store, I've lost maybe two overall from acclimation. And so that local fish store, I'm thinking like either their or their wholesaler is like not doing their job right, or something is wrong with the water from that local fish store. And Brandon knows about that local fish store, and I'm sure there is only one local fish store um, near us that excuse me that has those fish. And most of the fish that I've gotten from that local fish store has not done well. I don't know if it's just that the water is different, but for some reason, that store is, it's who knows. Anyways, back to breeding the Cardinal Tetra. So once you start conditioning the Tetras, it's very easy to say to jump the gun and say, okay, let's start breeding these today. What I want you to do is to actually take a step back and start first by conditioning them, because it's going to take a while to condition the Cardinal Tetras, anyways. And while you are doing that, start preparing everything else. So even if you get eggs the day, or like some random day, do you have the infusoria? Do you have the water? Because Cardinal Tetras need really soft water. Do you have the water to raise them up? Do you have the heater, the extra setups? Do you have the siphons? Do you have the time to feed them 2 times a day? So think about that first before you start actually putting them into the spotting setup. Because I promise you, if you've got good stock, like, and there's a whole argument about wild caught versus captive bred Cardinal Tetras. For now, I will say the captive bred Cardinal Tetras are probably a little easier to breed. So if you're looking to breed, maybe you want to get captive bred ones, even though some people say wild caught helps sustain the fisheries in the Amazon, helps sustain their environment. Um, but just thinking about that trip between wild caught and like captive bred, like who knows? Maybe the wild caughts are the ones that my local fish store brought in, and maybe it takes too much to bring them from all the way from South America here to the United States. So, I'd like to think that, hey, I paid my dues for this hobby. I'm gonna go get stuff from online. I'm pretty sure Aquahuna has captive bred cardinals. Pretty sure. I think you can look on the website. I think they do have captive bred, but I don't know if the ones that I got were captive bred. But I think after a while they updated it. Anyways, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, getting all the supplies ready. So set up the water is probably the most important thing when you're breeding the Cardinal Tetras. Use that RO water, use the rainwater, use the distilled water. Don't cut it with any tap water, even if your tap water is like 25 parts per million GH. It is not going to it's not going to pay out in the long run. I'll just say that. 100% RO. Soak some peat moss or some oak leaves or something clean leaves in there. Or what's the big leaf that like people always buy? It's like for the bed, it's like catapa or something, right? Catapa leaves. So soak some tannins in that water. It'll drop your pH even lower, and or Brandon says almond leaves. Yeah. So just soak it in some type of wood material. Peat moss works really well. You can put it in a sock. I put mine in a sock, and then I just go ahead and put the peat moss in, hang that sock on that in my water container, and then just let it soak like a tea bag for like 2 weeks. So then once that's done, then you start setting up your tank. You keep that water temperature starting off at the same temperature that you keep them in the community tank. So for me, that's like 24, 25 degrees Celsius. And then slowly raise the temperature, right? And until the day that they start spawning. And if it doesn't work, if you're up to like 30, 29, 30 degrees Celsius and it doesn't work, go the other way. Come back down. Okay? Because sometimes the increase in temperature can trigger them to spawn. Sometimes the decrease in temperature can trigger them. So don't like if keeping them at say 29 is not working, change the temperature after 1 or 2 days. Okay? You don't have to keep that static for the entire time. You can change your factors. Just try until they start breeding for you. And then just The day that you notice that they bred for you, note the water parameters: GH, KH, pH, three most important ones. Temperature is the fourth one. Note those four temperatures. Note the water level, where they bred. Did you have any moss? Was it peat moss on the bottom? Was it a bare bottom tank with any sort of mesh? What was it that triggered them to breed? Document everything. Write it down if you have to. And then from then on, every time you breed, start with that and then see if you can change those factors to give you more fish, right? So for me, the one that worked was when I started slowly raising the temperature up to 29 degrees Celsius, and then I had 10 nitrate, zero ammonia, zero nitrite. KH was at zero, GH was basically at zero, up to maybe like 25 parts. I use the test strips, so they don't really tell me that much information, but KH zero, GH 0 to 25 parts per million, mostly at zero, and then temperature 29 degrees Celsius. That's about 84 degrees Fahrenheit for the people in the US watching. So, the secrets that people don't tell you is that the Cardinal Tetras are really big sissies. So, when you put them into the tank, you need to wait a couple of days before you even like start looking for eggs. Let them get used to the setup first. Whereas neon tetras and most other tetras that we've been breeding for decades, all right, those tetras spawn at first light. So for neon tetras, like you can have a bare bottom tank, water level up to like, I don't have a ruler here, but this is about like maybe 6 inches or so water level. Okay, bare bottom tank, maybe even less, maybe like 4 inches. And then when you turn that light on, the neons should start spawning for you. As long as you know you got the water right, the temperature right, condition them well, neons spawn at first light. Same with glow light tetras, same with emperor tetras. These are other ones that I've done before, and I just never made a video out of them. So, but for cardinal tetras, they actually need to spend a couple days getting used to their surroundings. They're really skittish before you start seeing eggs. You're never, if you put your cardinal tetras into the spawning tank in the afternoon, you look in the morning, if you get eggs, perfect. But I have never had that happen before. I've always had to wait a couple days. And this can be between, 2 days to a week before they start spawning for me. So just make sure that when you are putting them in there, you're not expecting them to spawn immediately for you. You're waiting it out, you're giving them some time, and one of the greatest things that you can do during this time is to feed them a little bit of food, a little bit of live food. Don't feed any pellets, don't feed any flakes or any dead things. Feed something like baby brine shrimp, something that they've been eating already, and get them used to their surroundings. They're hunting in the tank. If you've got that peat moss bottom, that brine shrimp likes to settle on the bottom, and it's just it look. I guess it looks really tasty to the cardinals, but I love my cardinals love going through that peat moss and looking for the baby brine shrimp. Once they are happy, once they are comfortable, then that's when they start spawning. And cardinal tetras spawn with the weirdest inducing events. Like people say, like, okay, drop the temperature, maybe they'll spawn. Turn on the light, maybe they'll turn off the light, maybe they'll spawn. For me personally, I've noticed that cardinals start spawning around like 11 p.m. Okay, the whole tank is dark, no light whatsoever. They start spawning like probably at, I would say probably maybe at like dusk onwards to like 12, 11, 12 at night. You go with the flashlight, you can sometimes see some eggs. And then you don't really, I've stayed up before watching my cardinal tetras just to give you guys that knowledge. But around 2, 3 o'clock, they don't do anything from 2 to 3 ish, 5 ish, nothing, all the way up until dawn. And then when it's like 5 to 6 ish, that's when they have like another release of eggs or another trigger. So what I'm thinking, what I think might be happening is the dusk. That dusk will trigger them to breed. So like the changing light going from high lighting to low lighting will trigger them to breed. Or maybe at the same time, I have a heater, so the heater is always maintaining at 29. But perhaps in the wild, because the sun sets, the temperature gets colder, and that triggers them to breed. Um, but then again, when the light turns on in the or actually, I use like natural sunlight because I'm lucky. I have a lot of natural sunlight in my fish room. But when the light turns on, maybe that's another trigger for them to breed. And then, or it could also be the temperature. But like I said before, the temperature, not so likely. Maybe it's a combination. It doesn't have to be black and white, could be both. But for me, I have a heater that maintains it at 29 degrees throughout the night. So when you're looking for eggs and you see some in the morning, right at dawn, you waking up, you see your cardinal tetras. It could very well be that your cardinal tetras are not done spawning yet, because the eggs that you see might be from the night before, or the 11 p.m. the day before, right? So don't remove your cardinal tetras during dusk or the dawn, like 8 a.m. before you go to work or something. Like don't let them spawn a little bit longer and then remove them. I recommend maybe like 11 a.m. So remove the eggs, or not eggs, remove the cardinal tetras at 11 in the morning. So that way they've got plenty of time to spawn during the night. They've got plenty of time to spawn at in the morning. Um, Another thing is, if you do not have a way to protect your eggs from fungus, chances are you're not gonna keep your eggs. They're gonna fungus over. The cardinal eggs are really, really tiny. They're opaque, or not opaque. They are clear, and the opaque ones are the ones that are not fertile, right? Very similar to other fish. But these, I'm telling you, like these eggs will not. If you have a peat moss bottom, you will not find it ever. Your cardinal tetra parents will not find it ever, which means that it's great for the fry, right? If your cardinal tetras find the eggs, that means that your cardinals are going to eat the eggs. So that's why I, in my first video, I talked about the peat moss bottom. You probably have way more eggs buried into the bottom than you think, and it's because the white ones are like big shining lights on the black brownish peat moss, right? So you can see it when you go see them in the morning, and so can your adult fish. That's why you remove the parents, right? But those opaque ones signify that there are plenty more clear eggs that are fertile and developing inside your tank. So for me, um, because I like to photograph all these things, and it would be I've never found an egg in the peat moss. I've only found fry when they hatch out and when they become free swimming. And then the peat moss has a bunch of little tiny microorganisms on the bottom, just ready for the fish to eat. Whereas if you have something like a bare bottom tank, like um, what I do for my YouTube videos and to show people what they look like, I actually have to go in, use my hand in a dropper, and to siphon out the eggs. That way I can put them into the microscope, put them under, the camera or whatever. But that issue is, as soon as you remove that mesh, the water goes everywhere. There's currents in the water, right? The eggs go everywhere, and then the fish start eating them. Like they will literally snatch it out of, the front of your pipette, just to see, like just to see how much they like eating their own eggs. So if you're just a hobbyist at home and you're breeding and you want high yield, I would suggest the peat moss method. It keeps that water nice and tan for your fish. It keeps a lot of microorganisms, and it buries the eggs so that your adults can't find them. The good thing about the bare bottom tank is that you can see everything. Like if you see fish, you can probably see the eggs. You can probably see opaque eggs too. Um, And then if you want to share it on Facebook or something, I share a lot of like fish stuff on my social media. So if you guys have Instagram, you're welcome to follow me. It's just Avatar Aquatics on Instagram. No caps, no spaces, no underscores, or whatever else Instagram does. It's just Avatar Aquatics. And usually, um, if I have pictures or videos of things that I find really interesting, or if I'm breeding, say, Cardinal Tetras, then I will just post it onto my Instagram. Whereas sometimes it takes me a while to shoot a video and to edit everything. But I just finished my finals last Friday, which is awesome. So I've been sitting around doing nothing, just looking at my fish. It's the greatest thing ever. And another thing is when you are breeding the Cardinal Tetras, when when I like to do things is I like to document what works and what doesn't work. So keep that journal. Make sure you always know what works, what worked for you. Make sure you document everything. And some like I'm saying, like if you do a 50% water change the night before and then the day after you find fish eggs, don't just test the water and say, hey, look, I just tested the water. This is it. This is blah blah blah. Document that you did a 50% water change with RO water or with rainwater or with distilled water, because that might have been a very big factor in triggering your fish to spawn. Right. So if you guys any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. Let me know if I missed anything. Please just go ahead, chat. Let me know. Most of the time when I am breeding a new fish and I don't have any idea, like anything, because for some reason there's just not any instructions online about breeding the cardinal tetras. There's one guy on YouTube that's done this, and his name is Mark's Aquatics. I talked about him before. He does a lot of breeding videos, but he made a 42-minute video on breeding the cardinal tetra. Um, but he stopped after the fish are free swimming, and he doesn't have any sort of updates on raising the fry. And from my own experience, raising the fry is a challenge in and of itself. It is a pain, and that is because the fry are they hatch really quickly within like 16 to 20 hours. So I'm saying like you collect the eggs at noon or at 11 a.m. and you put them in the incubator, or you keep them wherever you keep your eggs, they will hatch that same night. So from 11 a.m. all the way, past noon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at around the 8 or 10, 8 to 10 p.m. at night, they'll hatch out. And which means that if you're not ready, if you don't have that methylene blue, okay, you're gonna lose your eggs that same day that they were laid. Okay. Because methylene blue, without methylene blue, your eggs have a very high chance of fungusing over, going bad. I don't know why. Um, I don't really see a lot of fungus on the eggs, but when I put them under the microscope, they're all opaque, all dead. So the second thing is it takes them 4 days. They start free swimming on day 4. So day 1 they hatch out. They're laid. They hatch out. Okay. Day 2 they look like little tiny egg yolks with a tail. That's what they look. It's just an egg yolk with a tail. Pretty much zero pigment. Just a little bit of a hint of yellow from the yolk. Day 3 they start getting a little bit more slender. Their egg yolks start disappearing a little bit. You can notice it. If you take a picture every day, or if you take a video every day, you can really see the difference. But day three, I think I was on day 3. Yeah, on day 3, they're getting smaller or thinner. The egg yolk is getting smaller, and then day 4, you can start seeing a little bit of eyes. You can kind of see this on day 3 if you're good with the microscope. If you don't have a microscope, maybe not. But on day 4 is when they start looking like little fry. If you ever bred like bettas, you know how like you can see those two big black eyes in the front, and then it's like a very triangular tail. That's what they look like, except cardinal tetras they're very long. Um, they're long and slender. Their fry are like little, um, I guess like little nails, fingernails, and they're long and slender, And to this day, I have never seen a Cardinal Tetra hunt or a little baby fry hunt. I feed infusoria like 3 times a day. I feed one once in the morning when I wake up, once at noon, and once again at night. Like a couple hours after the light turns off, because during the day you will never see your Cardinal Tetra fry. You'll just never see them, and you'll never know that they're there. The only indication that you'll get that your fish has spawned and that you have babies are the white opaque eggs, especially if you have the peat moss. Okay, but what you'll start noticing is if you go to your fish tanks in the middle of the night, like I'm talking like 11 p.m., 12 a.m., midnight. Excuse me, I'm gonna take some water. But if you go to your fish tank at night, in the middle of the night with a flashlight, then you click that flashlight on, you're gonna start seeing these little zoomies in the water, and they're gonna be little gray, um, little tiny gray fry, and they'll just kind of do they'll kind of do like the little darting motion, and then they'll remain still. So they'll like dart into the air or into the water, I guess, and back into the peat moss. And that is, let me tell you, that is the cutest thing that you can see at 12 in at like 12 a.m. ever. It is the cutest thing. You will just sit there and you will be like, holy crap, I just bred cardinal type. Like, if this this project has been so rewarding. Like the first time I saw my tetras spawn and the eggs were there and I saw those babies with the flashlight, I was ecstatic. I couldn't focus for the next like 2 3 hours. I was just like, I told my mom, I told my dad, I told my brother. My brother didn't care. My parents are like, oh, good for you. But I was like, holy crap, mom, do you know I just figured out how to breed cardinal tetras basically by scouring through the internet, trying to use my like prior knowledge on other tetras. Like, how does that work with cardinal tetras? Because let me tell you, if you breed it like a neon tetra, you're not going to get success. Like I said, they need a couple days. And once I saw those eggs, I started doubting myself. I was like, was it cardinal tetras, or were they like, did I accidentally put another fish in there? Could it have came in on the moss that I put in as a spawning medium? So Brandon, you asked, how do you personally make your infusor? Okay, very very easy. You don't have to go out, or you don't have to cut up some lettuce or anything like that. Okay, take a clear plastic cup, um, or if you've got one of these at home. Hey, Marvin. Nice to see that you have joined us. But cut off the tip here, okay? Take a plastic bottle like this. And then what you do is you fill it up with your tank water and then drop in some pelleted fish food. I'm talking like just a little bit on your palm. Let's see. So probably like a pinch, okay? And depending on how much water you have, for one something like this, like at around this level here where the water is right now, it takes about a pinch. Okay, drop it in, and then add in some of your Java moss. Okay, Java moss plus fish food plus tank water is literally the best way to make infusoria. It works like every single time. Now, your water is going to get really stinky. It's going to stink very, very bad. So what I like to do is I like to, cut this off and then cover it with some plastic wrap. Okay, and you cover that plastic wrap, poke a couple holes in, very small holes, get the air going, and you're going to notice that your water turns really, really white. It's like opaque white. Do not ever feed that to your fish. That's bacteria. You don't want to feed that to your fish. Then the water is going to partially clear. People always say the water is going to clear. It's never going to clear. It's going to be very, very, it's going to be opaque. And what you're going to actually see is that you start seeing these little white dots in the water. Okay. When you can start actually make out the different the different dots, that's when you know you have infusoria. It's not that your water clears it's that you start seeing these white dots, and what you'll see is that they'll start riding the current. So like if I have a if this was an infusoria culture, I'll start seeing white dots here, and I can shine a flashlight and I'll see them even better. But they'll start like going up and going around, going up and going around. They have these like little fun escalator rides. It's really weird. But they'll kind of swim in the same sort of general direction, and that's when you know you have your infusoria. What I do is I take a syringe and a needle, an 18 gauge needle. When you go to the pharmacy, you can grab like a needle plus syringe, at least in the US, for quite cheap. It's like $1. And I take a syringe and I put the needle on and I blunt the needle like on a brick or on your sidewalk or something, um, so I don't accidentally kill myself. But then I pull it up, I draw it up, I make sure I don't get any of like the gross, stinky, rotting fish food or anything like that. But I draw up the infusoria and then I feed it like that. So Marvin, you asked, what is the difference between cardinal tetras and neon tetras in breeding? So neon tetras breed much more easier or easily, and it's we already figured out what triggers them to spawn. It's that they during the night or the day before you put them in, like usually in the afternoon, let them get settled to their surroundings, and then in the day, as soon as the light turns on or as soon as the sun comes up, they start breeding. You can also do a lot of pairwise spawning with neon tetras, so just one male and one female, and 90% of the time they'll spawn for you. So a lot of the farms in Indonesia and the other Southeast Asian countries that have a lot of breeding, they'll actually have these like the little glass box containers with the cardinal neon tetras, the neon tetras in there, and they'll keep the water level relatively low, and then that way they'll spawn at first light, and then they can remove the parents, and then the eggs are just left over. With cardinal tetras, I prefer spawning them in a group. Like I said before, cardinal tetras are very skittish fish. It's very hard for them to feel at home. So when you have numbers, that's one of the best ways to make cardinal tetras feel more comfortable. When they're in a shoal, they feel much safer. Second thing is, for cardinal tetras, light in the morning doesn't necessarily stimulate them to spawn. Like they can spawn an hour after dawn or 2 hours after dawn. It really like they spawn when they feel like it. That's what I'm saying. Um, those are probably the two big differences. Um, a lot of the cardinal tetras still come from the wild, so we don't really know too much. And of the people who figured it out, not a lot of people share. I had to figure out a lot of this stuff by myself because people like to keep it under wraps. Cardinal tetras are beautiful fish. They fetch a lot of money, and if someone was a farmer from fish farmer, like why would you ever share your secrets, right? But if you know where to look, you kind of find out some of the like you could piece like information together. And one of the things is a lot of the websites, like the popular fish keeping websites, um, like Spruce Pets in the US, it always feels like they're just copy and pasting each other, and it doesn't ever like I don't ever feel like there is anything of value from those websites, because number one, a lot of them are wrong, or at least according to my observations and my experience, a lot of them are wrong. Um, they say cardinal tetras breed at night. They do breed at night, but they also breed during the day, right? So if you're only breeding them at night and you're removing them at dawn when the light turns on, because some of them say, hey, light turns on, they can see the eggs, remove the eggs, or remove the. Well, you're missing out on like a half of that spawn just by removing them. So yeah, took a while, but I'm glad that I kind of figured it out. What the stage I'm at right now is the free swimming stage, and fry. Let me tell you, fry are active at night. They are much more active at night. During the day, they'll just hide in the peat moss. They'll hide in the moss. You'll never see them during the day, even if they are free swimming. If they are if you're feeding them, if they're free swimming, they still hide. Um, but at night, go on with a flashlight. don't shine the flashlight too long. You'll freak them out. But the reason why I freak them out is so that I can make sure I actually have fry. But um, yeah, so cardinal tetras are a little bit different. So Brandon says, how many viable eggs do you get per spawn? Do you have any information yet as to how many make it to stable juveniles? So per spawn of the method with the mesh and the bare bottom tank, I get about 10 eggs at a time. And that's with 10 fish in a 10-gallon tank with the mesh. Okay, that's per day. You can probably find about 10 eggs. And like I said before, some of them, the one I'm not counting the ones that are infertile, right? If you add the infertile egg, you probably get about like 30 eggs. A lot of them are infertile, or like 20 to 30 eggs overall. 10 to 15, half of them are infertile, half of them are fertile. I don't really know why. Maybe it's like my water, maybe it's the water depth, who knows. But as of now, I get about 10 to 15 every day, or like every spawn, sorry. Um, what I can do is, because I have a bare bottom tank, I can monitor that really closely. And what I'll do is I'll set up multiple tanks to do that. Um, and what I'll do is I'll just one day I'll spawn them here, and then I'll move the parents into another tank and then remove the eggs, and then I can move them back. Depends on how many cardinal tetras you begin with, right? If you've got like 10 tetras, then you've got one tank. But if you've got 30, like I have albino tetras or cardinal tetras. You guys probably know I have albino cardinal tetras, and those spawn pretty much the same way. Um, so in addition to the normal ones, do you have any information yet as to how many make it to stable juveniles? Um, so right now, I'm at the stage where they are free swimming. You can see that they're getting larger, but I've never seen them like actually hunt. Like I said, they are very active at night. During the day, you don't really ever see them. Um, so unlike, and I try not to disturb them too much at night. I don't want them to die. There's one of the things that everyone out there says, is that these cardinal tetra eggs and fry are are sensitive to light. I don't know what sensitive to light means, guys. Like, is it, or do they die if you shine a light on them? Which, in my experience, has they've been fine. But I've also like um not like covered up my tank before, and my cardinals spawned, but all the eggs were white. So is it that is there a certain length of time? Is it sunlight that's been screwing with them? Like, I don't know. Um, so that's one of, like, I wanted to talk about the light. I'll talk about it maybe just a little bit, but how many make it to stable juveniles? I will say, like, of the viable eggs that you get per spawn, um, if you have methylene, you need methylene blue. If you do not have, most of them will die. But if you have methylene blue, if you have those viable eggs, all of them will hatch out. All, or 99% of them will hatch out. It's very, I don't want to say all of them, but 99% of them will hatch out. 99% of them will make it to day 4, where they become free swimming, 4 or 5. Um, and then if you don't feed them on day 4, 100% will die on day 6. So 5, maybe they'll live through 5. On day 6, they'll die. And during this time, I do like little tiny bits of water changes. So what I'll do is, I actually brought this here, but I have one of these like little medicine cups for children. So like if you have kids at home who's been using these, like the little medicine syrup cups, and what I'll do is I have like a container, right, with the eggs, and I'll hatch them out. And to do the water change, I'll use a pipette. I'll pipette out water, and I'll put it into one of these cups. And then that way I can look, because it's clear on the bottom. I can see if I kept, or if I accidentally pipetted out any babies or eggs. If I don't, I'll dump it. And then that way I know exactly how much water I am changing out. I know exactly how much water I'm adding back in. And they don't need methylene blue after they hatch out, but you should not do like 50% water changes all the time. The less water changes you can do, the better. The less time you transfer them, the better. So hey, take what you will from that. If you really, if you like, you can do it with a bare bottom tank, but you're going to have to adapt your tank um, to like, number one, stop the egg from or adults, stop the adults from eating the eggs. Number two, you're gonna have to remove the eggs. Um, if you feed them during the spawning tank or in the spawning tank, just make sure that if you have a like the mesh bare bottom tank ones, the food tends to catch down below the mesh, and that ends up creating a lot of like bacteria. And obviously, like brine shrimp don't live forever in fresh water, so brine shrimp has a lot of salt content. Salt is minerals, and who knows if that'll raise your GH. But overall, um, feed them something that it's easy to clean in the spawning container. So you might want to feed like little tiny pellets. Make sure they eat every single one. You can feed mosquito larvae. They're always at the front, at the top of the at the top of the water, right? So if you're cleaning them out, like your fish will just eat them when they're hungry. Um, but if you're feeding something like brine shrimp, which I have done before, I just rinse them really well. The brine, I've noticed that the brine shrimp and the flake foods that you're dropping in tend to collect under the mesh where the water flow is a little less strong, and so that way it'll like it's basically impossible to find your eggs, and if you do have eggs, they'll probably die. Um, let's see, what else was I going to talk about? Oh yeah, and the water level for the spawning container. So if you're say a peat moss bottom, okay, and same with the mesh, you want the spawning medium and the top of the water to be as low as possible, because if you fill, if you go back to my part one, you can see that my tank is not filled up all the way. And that's because if I filled it up all the way, number one, I'm going to need a ton of RO water. And RO water is not free. But if you fill it up all the way, your moss is like down here, right? And your eggs are getting scattered over your moss here. And your cardinals can be mating here, right by the moss. They could be inside the moss, or they could be right up here, scattering it. And if you're spawning it as a group, this like journey going from the top of the water down to the middle of the water down into the moss is like prime time for the feast of the other cardinals, right? The other cardinals are still in the tank, and they see that they're spawning, they will go and eat those eggs up. So what I do is I keep that water level as low as I can possibly make it to still have my cardinals spawn, so that even if they are spawning over the moss, right, and the water level stays like 4 inches, 3 or 4 inches above the moss, my fish drop the eggs, they only have this much to travel, maybe 1 or 2 inches at most, right? So that way, it's a lot less likely that these eggs will be eaten. One of the things is like if you keep your filter on one side and say you have a spawning mesh or a spawning, um, what's it called? Moss, like over your peat moss or over your mesh or whatever, keep those two separate, because your filter tends to either push that moss around or suck your moss into the filter or by the filter. And so you're like you'll wake up, you come check your tank in the morning or at noon or whenever you go, and you'll see that your moss is like all the way on the other side. Your eggs, you don't see them anymore because they probably don't spawn them over the mesh, or just over, like if you have peat moss, they'll spawn by your filter. Don't do a hang on back. Just use a small sponge filter. It's more than enough, because you're not really keeping your cardinals in the spawning container for that long, anyways, right? You got to remove them one time or another. Let's see. Anyone else got questions? Have I explained most of the things clearly? Um, Okay. Well, um, another thing I was wanted to talk to you about was I got a bunch of rubby nose tetras. Really, okay. So Brandon said, "Do you really need filtration?" Um, Depends. Number one, the filtration helps with keeping the water temperature the same, especially if you're doing a bigger tank like a 10 gallon. Most people like you can probably do it in a 5 gallon and um, have the heater sort of like just going through and having that hot water rise and the cold water settle and it'll sort of mix your water for you. But with a 10 gallon tank, my heater is on one side. I don't want my heater to cook my eggs, so that heater doesn't have the power to go all the way onto the other side where the eggs are spawning. If you take a look at my setup in part one. So I keep filtration number one for the aeration and the water circulation. Number two is because for me, the Cardinal Tetras take maybe 5 or 6 days to spawn if I put them into the tank. So during that time, I still got to feed them. Um, so that really helps with filtration. And plus, I don't really have that much RO water. I would prefer not to do really big water changes. I'm sure that, hey, if you want to start an experience with experiment with no heaters, I'm sure there's probably going to be some success in there, but you're probably going to have to do some water changes. Who knows if you can keep the temperature? If you have a heated fish room, um, if you have a heated fish room and you're able to heat your actual water to 84 degrees, I don't know how hot that fish room would have to be, but if you're able to do that, like by all means, try it. And the less that you disturb them, um, the better. You let them go through and get used to their surroundings for the first 5 days. Just only go there to feed. It's very tempting. I know. I know. It's very tempting to go and check on them every hour. Did they spawn yet? Did they spawn yet? Did they spawn yet? With that flashlight, looking through the peat moss, looking through the mesh, like did they spawn yet? And I've done that before, but that just keeps them from spawning. When you've got a big dude looking at you through the glass like every hour, like, are you guys mating yet? Like, I'm sure that can be very, very traumatic for the fish. And what I found is that if you just forget about them for a day or two, you know, you know, provided that you have the right conditions, they get much more comfortable. Even if you have 10 cardinal tetras in a 10 gallon, even if you have a school or a shoal, and guys, like once you start spawning cardinal tetras, it's like you don't want to stop anymore. You want to spawn them every day. But give them a rest. Give them a rest. They will spawn for you. Just if you have multiple setups, like what I did with different tanks, looking at different ways of spawning, move the adults every week, maybe. Don't move them every day because, like I said before, it takes some time. Um, yeah, that's probably my biggest tip is just patience. When you're breeding cardinal, like I think if you bred like something like glow light tetras or neon tetras, and you see them spawn at first light, like the night before you put them in, and then they spawn. You're like, hey, that's like instant gratification in the grand scheme of themes, but grand scheme of things. But with cardinal tetras, they really do take a couple more days to get used to the surrounding and I'm waiting for like one of you guys to like comment on this live stream once it like gets recorded or now like I bred my cardinal tetras and they spawned for me the next day. Well, please tell me how to do that because it's really annoying like trying to figure out like what day they'll spawn. But then once they get spawning, once they feel comfortable, they do spawn quite often. Like you can spawn them very, very often. It's not like German blue rams where the females lay eggs and then you remove the eggs and then it takes her like 2 weeks to like fill up back again. They spawn quite often, especially if you're doing it in a group because not this. I don't know about the individual females. I won't like disclaimer, do not know, have not measured, have not marked my females to do that. But if you do them in a group, you can get quite a lot of eggs if you just treat them well, make sure they're comfortable, don't move them too much, and then once you do get the eggs, remove the adult. You can put them back in the community tank, right? And then the babies will hatch up and it'll be really, really nice. Um, So I usually do like a 1 hour live stream. So we have like about 5 minutes left of this live stream. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. But I was going to tell you guys about my card or my rummy nose tetras. Some of you might know from previous live streams that I had a filter failure during one of the times when we had a lot of exams. So I didn't notice on the first day, and I had like floaters on the top of my tank, stopping the water from being able to mix with the air. And my entire school of 12 rummy nose tetras like bellied up the day after, and it was really like sad for me. Rummy nose tetras and cardinals are some of my favorite fish. I'm a very big like tetra guy, and I was like reeling from that loss. But a while ago, about like 2 weeks ago, I went and got some more rummy nose tetras. They came in with ick. We had been treating that with ick X, and I feel like for me personally, I would prefer to use methylene blue than ick X. I just feel like the ick X concentrations is not as much as it could be. And I have this one tank for some reason where every time I dose ick X, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Whereas like the other tanks are fine. Like I can dose ick X for maybe like 2 or 3 days, and it'll work. But for some reason, that one tank, like ICX, just doesn't really work ever. And it gets like cleared by I don't know if it's like the plants or the gravel or substrate, because you're supposed to remove the biological filtration, but when you've got a planted tank, the soil is your biological filtration. So I don't know how I would do that. And what I like, just I guess like what you could do is put them into a quarantine tank and then quarantine the fish. But like I said, it's a planted tank. I'm not really sure what kind of fish I have in there, to be honest. So okay, hey Liz. So are these tanks that can't take higher heat? This is Liz. I went from Rash, by the way. My YouTube is making me. Are you talking about my Cardinal Tetra tanks? Or are you talking about my ick um, ick tank? Because the rummy nose tetras that I got from you, they were in a like I just got them, so they were separated, and I was able to dose them with medication, but not until after I realized that there was like it had spread to a lot of the other rummy nose tetras in the school. I got like a school of I don't know maybe like 8 or 9 to replace that 12 that I had lost. But yeah, okay. Hey Liz, we were talking about cardinal tetras, breeding cardinal tetras, and it's almost time for me to go. I go at like usually 8 o'clock, but you're welcome to go back to the recording and listen to the cardinal tetra stream. Most of the I think we talked about cardinal tetras the entire time. And Brandon said I use copper and salt and it always works. I have shrimp. Like people always say like, hey, don't put copper in your shrimp tanks. I don't. I've never had like any. I've never done it. I've never had problems with it. But also, I think on June, no, yeah, June actually, the June meeting, I am presenting about the cardinal tetras. So if you're here from RAS, um, see if you can make it to the June one because I'm probably presenting. And then same with salt. Like I feel like people always say like salt will kill your plants, and sometimes I'm just like, well, why don't we just dose the tank with something that's safer for plants? Because dude, it is just like a pain in the butt to deal with. To be to be honest, um, copper is quite a hot topic in the fish hobby. Um, but yeah, for cardinal tetras, dude, like first, um, I don't know if you're here from the cardinal tetra and the German blue ram. I started breeding with with Amano shrimps, and for a while I was like really obsessed with it. Made a lot of videos on it. And now that we're moving on to cardinal tetras, I feel like hopefully these videos will reach a wider audience. I feel like in this in like the aquarium hobby, mono shrimps are like part of it's like this big, whereas like neon tetras and cardinal tetras are like basically the hobby. And then there's like betas over here. Are you no longer breeding amanos? Well, I lost my male, so right now we are trying to grow up some of smaller, more like they're like this big, but I'm trying to grow get some males in so I can. I've got like 4 females, literally just like saddled and ready, but I don't have a male, so I'm gonna have to get more eggs. Let's see what else did the chat say. I used something once that contained it. I didn't realize it. Most of my shrimp died. I avoid it like the plague now. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then never adding copper in my tanks. Um. Okay. I already did that. And then okay, Brandon. I see. You got any males? I'll take some males. Maybe just like 2 this time. I don't know how much you want from them, but the males are like they're smaller. Even like if they're the same age, they're smaller. I'm sure you know how to tell males from females. Okay, well, the females are like thick. They're like like a shrimp is like long, right? But the females are like also like very very tall, wide looking, and they have a really fat rounded abdomen. So that's where they keep the eggs. Whereas the males don't need to do that, so they have like a smaller stature. And yeah, juveniles. I would just say like juveniles. They don't have that really thick, wide abdomen or tall abdomen. If you want to if you want to take a look at part 1 of my breeding a mono shrimp series, it's like 11-minute video. In the very beginning, I tell you exactly how to tell males from females, and I have some pictures. If you ever get buried females, um, then you have males, right? So, and then, but yeah, so it's 8:02. I'm running a little bit over, but it's been really good conversation with you guys. So I'm about to get off. Still got some other stuff to do tonight, but thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Really, really excited to have done this live stream. It's been a while since I did my live streams. Gonna have a really crazy summer, but see you guys next time. See you guys in the next video, and thank you guys so much for coming in today.